Hello everyone, I am Pradnya. In this video, we are going to study chapter number 11, Tuples. We shall be discussing how to create tuples, how to access tuple, various operations on the tuples and tuple manipulation using some building methods and functions. So let's get started. Let's try to understand what is tuple. Tuple is also a standard data type provided by Python like string and list. It can contain mixed type of data which are separated by comma, and we will enclose these elements in the round brackets, or we can call it as a parenthesis. The important property of tuple is tuples are immutable, means we cannot change the content of the tuple in place. Let's look at some of the differences between list and tuple. List is mutable item. We can change the content of the list, but tuple is immutable. We enclose the elements of the list in square bracket, but we enclose the elements of the tuple in round bracket. And we can remove the element of the list, but we cannot remove the elements of the tuple. Okay, now let's study how to create tuple. We can create tuple in two different ways, just like list. We can place the elements of the tuple in round bracket or in parentheses which are separated by commas, and we can use this built-in constructor tuple. Here is the general form to enclose the elements of the tuple in the round brackets. Using this construct, we can create different form of tuples. The first is empty tuple. The empty round bracket means it is an empty tuple. You can see here there are no elements in the bracket. The second form of the tuple is single element tuple. In this form we have only one element, but it should also be followed by comma, because if we mention without comma, the Python will consider it as an integer value, not as an element of the tuple. The third form is long tuple. Long tuple contains many elements which can split across the line. And the last form is the nested tuple. Nested tuple means tuple contains another tuple inside one tuple. In this example, this is a nested tuple. You can see here there is one more tuple inside this tuple T4. The second way of creating tuple is we can create tuple from the existing sequence. Existing sequence can be string, tuple, list or dictionary. So here is the syntax for that. In the bracket we have to mention the sequence from which we have to create the tuple. So for example, here we are creating a tuple from string, and in the second example we are creating tuple from a list. So we initialize one list to a variable list1, and using the tuple we are creating the tuple from the list. We studied how to create the tuples by initializing the values, but there is one more way we can create the tuple, that we can take input from the keyboard. You know, to take input through the keyboard we use input function. But to take input for the tuple, we need some arrangement. So we can use this tuple method along with the input function. So this is our input which will get stored in T1, and we tried to print, we got this output. But what's the problem with this output? Though we enter digits, it is getting converted to the characters. So to resolve this problem, we can use the eval function along with input. Eval function decide the input type depending on the given input. So look at the input here. When we are entering the values, it should be separated by comma. This parenthesis is optional. You can skip it also. When you will compare this input with the output, we are getting exactly same. Here digits are not getting converted to character. So generally when we want to take input via keyboard in case of list or in case of tuple also, we use the eval function, because the eval function evaluates the data based on the input type. So to create tuple, you can initialize the values by enclosing the elements in the round bracket, or you can use this tuple constructor. If you want to take input through the keyboard, you can use eval function along with input. The next topic is accessing tuple. It is also just like string and list. So you know the concept how we can access list and string. We can access these data type using index. In the same way, tuple also can be accessed in the forward direction as well as in backward direction. When we want to access in forward direction, we start the index with 0, and when we access in the reverse direction, we start index with -1. So both positive and negative index you can use to access the individual element of the tuple. Now we will be discussing the different tuple operations. So here is the list of the tuple operation. Maximum operations are similar to list. Let's discuss the first operation, that is traversing a tuple. Traversing means accessing each element of the tuple. We have to iterate through the tuple and then we can process each element. And for iterating we use for loop. When we want to traverse through the items, we can use the in membership operator. The same example I have considered here, which I have taken for list. We are creating one tuple and we are accessing each elements of the tuple and printing it. If you want to traverse a tuple using index, then we can use the range function with the for loop. This is also the same example. We are creating one tuple here and we are accessing the tuple from the index 0 till index 5, and we are printing the elements of the tuple using that indexing method. So using this code also we are printing the elements of the tuple. The second operation is joining the tuple. We can use the concatenation operator to join two or more tuples, but both should be of tuple types. So here we have created one tuple T1, the another tuple is T2, and we join both the tuples using concatenation operator. So these are the elements of the tuple T1 and followed by the elements of the tuple T2. So when we are joining the tuple, both the operand should be of tuple type. We cannot join number with a tuple, complex number with a tuple, even we cannot join string with tuple and list with tuple. If we will try to join this, we will get the exception type error. The third operation is replicating tuple. It is also similar to list. We use replication operator to repeat the number of the elements of the tuple. So here is the syntax, and take one example. I am creating one tuple, multiplying it with 3, so the elements of the tuple getting repeated 3 times. The important operation that we are going to study now is slicing tuple. Slicing means extracting the portion. You can see here it is also similar to list. So in square bracket we have to mention the starting index, then the ending index and the step. So always the ending index will be stop -1 and the step is also a step -1. Let's try to understand this slicing once again with one simple example. Here there is one tuple with some elements. So first of all let's write the index so that later we will come to know. So this is 4th index, 5, 6 and 7. Now look at the first slicing. It is mentioned here 2 to 5, but it will go 2 to 4 because the upper limit we don't include. So from 2 to 4 means we are getting 12, 13, 14. So here is the output. Now let's take the next example. It is mentioned starting is 1, ending will be 6 and the step is 2 mentioned here means we have to skip one character in between. So the range will be from 1 to 6 and we have to skip one character. So starting with 11. So 11 we have got, then we will skip 2, then 13 we got, we will skip 14, then 15 we got. After that this is the 6th item we have to skip. So our limit is only till 6. We cannot go beyond that element. Let's consider one more example. Here I skipped the starting part, even I skipped the ending index also, and this is the step value. So when we skip the starting and ending index, it will consider the whole tuple. And step is 3 means we have to skip the 2 characters in between. So it will start with 10. So we got the 10. Now skip the 2 characters. So we will skip 11 and 12. We got the next element as 13. Again skip the 2 elements 14 and 15. We got the next element 16. Now we cannot skip the 2 elements as we are at the ending part of the tuple. It works in the same way for string, for list and even for tuple. Let's find out now how to compare a tuple. So this is the next operation. Comparing means we will compare the elements of one tuple with the elements of the another tuple. If the elements of both the tuples are same, are equal, then we will get the answer in the form of true, because we use comparison operators for comparing the tuple, and you know comparison operator gives the result in the form of true or false. When we are comparing the tuple, both should be of tuple type. So the elements will get compared based on the ordinal value. Now we will be discussing about deleting the tuples. You know tuple is immutable data type, so we cannot delete the individual element of the tuple, but we can delete the whole tuple. To delete whole tuple, we can use del statement. So here is the syntax. With del we have to mention the tuple name. So consider one tuple here, and I am applying del statement on this tuple. So the elements also will get deleted. Even this object T1 is also gets deleted. So if I will try to print the T1 which doesn't exist, that's why we will get the exception name error. So del statement deletes the elements along with that object. So in this way we studied 6 different operations which we can perform on the tuple. Maximum operations are similar to list. So let's continue with the next topic. As we have discussed earlier also that tuple is immutable item, we cannot modify the content of the tuple in place. But still, if I want to modify the content of the tuple with some arrangement, we can indirectly change the content of the tuple. So one of the arrangement is unpacking. Let's try to understand what is the unpacking means. Packing is creating the tuple from set of values, and unpacking means creating individual values from tuple elements. So all the tuple elements will get stored in different variables using unpacking. So here is the syntax. We have to write the variable names, and the number of the variable name should match with the elements of the tuple, and here we have to mention the name of the tuple. We'll try to understand this concept with one simple example. Consider one tuple having 2 elements here. This is the first element and this is the second element. Now I have to unpack this. I will initialize these values to some variables. So this is the syntax. First we have to write the variable name. So I have given one variable name admission number, and the second variable name is name, and we have initialized it with the tuple. So what will happen now? The first value will get stored in this variable and the second value will get stored in the variable name. So when we will print it, you can see here we are getting the values. We will use this unpacking concept for modifying the content of the tuple that we will study in this video. Now let's discuss about the tuple manipulation. Tuple can be manipulated using some built-in functions and methods. So here are some of the functions we are going to study. We studied lot of function in case of list, but the functions which are used to insert values in the list, even to modify the values and delete the values, we cannot use that function in case of tuple because tuple is immutable. We cannot add the element. So here is the list of some of the methods and functions. So let's study one by one in detail. The first function is len function. Len function returns the number of elements of the tuple. So this is the syntax. We have to mention the tuple here, for which we have to count the number of elements. So here is a one tuple having 2 elements. So when we applied length on that, we got the number of elements here. And in this case we have 2 elements. So the output is 2. The second category of functions which we can apply on tuple is min, max and sum. You know, min function returns the minimum elements, max function returns the maximum element, and sum calculates the sum of the elements. We have to mention the tuple inside this function, and for max also it is same, and sum also it will work in the same manner. So consider one tuple here. When we applied min on this tuple A, we got the minimum value. In case of max, we will get the maximum value, and by using sum we will get the sum of the elements. One thing we can note down here, when we are applying max and min function, the values should be of same data type. Either it should be int type or float or even characters. Characters also will get compared based on the ordinal value and will get the maximum or minimum from that. And to calculate sum, it should be of the numeric elements, because then only we can calculate the sum of the elements if it is integer type or if it is a float type. The third method which we can apply on the tuple is index. Index returns the index of the first match element, and it works by following this syntax. So let's consider one tuple. It should be brackets here. So you can see I have to find out the index of 30, which is at this place. Even it is at this place also, because tuples allows duplicate entries, but it will give the index of the first matched element. So we will get 2. You can see here the index of this element is 2. If the item doesn't exist in the tuple, we will get the exception value error. The next method is the count method. Count method also we applied on list. It will return the count of the item or the occurrence of the specified item. Means it will give how many times that item is present in the tuple. So we have to mention the item here, and this is the method. So consider this tuple. Here I have to count the element 40, and it is present in the tuple 3 times. So we got this. If it is not present, then we will get the 0. In case of tuple, the count method works in the similar way as list. Let's consider one more function now, that is sorted function. Sorted function sorts the elements of the tuple in the ascending order by default, but it will create a new tuple. So the first parameter is sequence. It can be list or tuple. So it works in the similar way for both list and tuple. And the second parameter is reverse equals to true or false. If you want to sort the list in the reverse direction, then you can write reverse equals to true. Let's understand with one simple example. Here is one tuple, and we are applying sorted function on that tuple and storing the sorted elements in the variable s tuple. So you can see here, when we are printing it, we are getting the sorted tuple. So the new tuple got created using the sorted function. If you want to sort in the reverse direction, means in the descending order, then you can write reverse equals to true. So the tuple got sorted in the descending order. The next important method is tuple method. We already discussed this when we are creating the tuple from other sequence. It is one of the method to create the tuple. It will create the tuple from the sequence. It can be string, list or tuple. So here is the syntax. If we will not mention any sequence, it will create the empty tuple. Even we can create the tuple from the string, we can create the tuple from the list, and we can create the tuple from the dictionary. Now we are sure about tuple, that tuple is immutable. But still, if I want to modify the content of the tuple, then we can do it indirectly. So there are two ways to do it. First, using tuple unpacking, and the second way is using the list and tuple. Okay, let's discuss the first method using unpacking. So these are the three steps for that. First, unpack the tuple. So unpacking, you know how to do it. We create the variables based on the elements of the tuple. So here there are total 4 elements. So I am writing the 4 variables here and initializing it with tuple. So this is A now, this is B, this will be C, and this will be D. The second step is redefine or change the desired variable. We can change the individual element now by initialization. Now suppose I want to change the value of C to 35. So I have written this initialization statement. Now after changing the value, again we will repack it. So it will be again a tuple. And you know how to create a tuple from values. We have to enclose the elements in the round bracket separated by comma. So again we got the tuple. So in this way we modified the value of one of the element of tuple, but that too indirectly. We cannot change it directly because tuple is immutable. Now let's understand the second method, how we can modify the values of the tuple. The first step is we have to convert tuple to list. Because list is mutable, we can change the content of the mutable. So first we will change the tuple to list. So using list method we can change the tuple to list. Now the second step is we will make changes in the desired element. So using the index we can access the individual element of the list and we can modify directly by initialization. So the first element having index 0 and the second element is having index 1. So I am going to change the value of this index, means I am going to change this element to some other element. After modifying it, we will create the tuple from list again using the tuple method. You know tuple method is used to create a tuple from another sequence. So here sequence is list. So we created one tuple from list. So in the first step we changed tuple to list. In the second step we modified the content of the list, and in the third step again from list we converted to tuple. The next topic is nested tuple. We are familiar with this topic. We have studied in case of list. The same concept we are going to apply here also. The nested tuple means inside one tuple we will have another tuple, and to access the individual elements of the nested tuple we know we have to use the multiple indices. You know how to access the elements of the nested list. Same thing we can apply here. If I want to access the elements of the nested tuple, we have to use the multiple indices. So 1 0 will give the action because the index of this element is 1, and for this individual element the index is 0. So 1 0 will give the word action, and if I want to access this element, then I have to give first this index and the next index is this. So 1 1 will give the word horror. If I want to access the whole nested tuple, then with one index we will get the complete nested tuple. Let's write one simple program. Here we have to enter n numbers and store in a tuple, and we have to separate this tuple in two tuples. The tuple T1 should contain these elements and the tuple T2 should contain the elements in the following manner. We can do this with slicing. So look at the elements of the T1, how we will get these elements. We are starting with the first element and skipping the next element. We will get this tuple. So how we can write slicing for this? Anyhow we are scanning the whole tuple, so I can skip the starting and the ending part, and we have to mention step here too, so that the step will be 1 because we will consider step minus 1. So skipping one character in between and considering all other characters, we will get tuple 1. Now how can we write the slicing for the tuple 2? Here we are beginning with the element 20. So what is the index of the 20? The index of 20 is 1. So I should start the list from 1 now and it will go till end. So I will skip the ending index. Now for this T2, the step is same because we are skipping one character in between. So starting with 20, then we'll skip 30, we got 40, then again we'll skip 50, then we got 60. So look at the elements of the T2 we got correctly. Now let's write code for this. First of all, let's create one empty tuple. Now in variable n, we are going to take the number of elements. Now using for loop, we can take that many number of elements. Now we will take the element in variable ELE. After taking the element, we have to add that element to the empty tuple T. But we don't have any method to append the item to the tuple, or even we don't have insert method to insert the item to the tuple because tuple is immutable. Then we can use concatenation operator plus to combine the element to the tuple. So we can use plus operator to add the element. So in ELE we have taken the element, and you know when we are creating the tuple with one element, we should use comma. Now according to the instructions, we have to separate tuple T, and that we have to separate in one tuple T1. So I am creating one empty tuple T1 and one more empty tuple T2. Now let's apply the slicing on the tuple T, and that elements we can add to the T1 or T2. So let's do it for T1. So T1 plus, now we have to apply the slicing on tuple T. I am skipping the starting index as well as ending index, and the step is 2. And for tuple 2, we are using indexing starting with 1, and I am skipping the ending index, so it will go to end of the tuple. Now the step is same 2. So in this way we got T1 and T2. Now let's print it. Now let's check the output. First of all, we have to enter the number of elements. So according to the input, I am going to enter 6 elements. Now we have to enter the elements. So the elements are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 and 60. You can see here, according to the instructions, we have separated the tuple in tuple T1 and in tuple T2. We can write equal to sign here so that we will get the perfect answer. Let's write one more program. In this program, we have to take the names of the n student and then store them in the tuple, and then we have to ask one name from the user, and we have to check whether it is present in the tuple or not. So let's try to understand the logic of this program. First of all, we will create one empty tuple. After that, we will take the number of students, and using for loop, we will take the names of n number of students. Then we will enter the name of the student which we have to search in the tuple. Then we will compare this name with the elements of the tuple. If we get it, then we can print that this name exists in the tuple. Otherwise, we can print the message that this student doesn't exist in the tuple. First of all, I am going to create the empty tuple. Now we have to take the number of elements, so that I am going to store in the variable n. Now let's use for loop to take the name for n number of times. I am using variable student name to take the names. Now let's add each name to the tuple. Now we have to enter the name which we have to search in the tuple. For that I am taking one variable s. Using if statement I am going to check whether s in name. If the student name what we have to search will match with the element of the tuple, then we can print the message that student exists in the tuple. Now we can write else part. If it doesn't match, we can write the message that the name doesn't exist in the tuple. Let's run the program and check the output. We have to enter the number of students. I am going to take 3 students. Now we have to enter the names. Let's take some random name. Now we have to enter the name what we have to search. You can see here the entered name ABC exists in the tuple, so we are getting the message that ABC exists in the tuple. Now you know how to create the tuple. You can practice some more programs also. Try to practice some solved program and some unsolved programs. So in this video we covered another important data type provided by the Python, that is tuple. Hope you have understood the concept so far. If you have any query, write in the comments below. If you found this video meaningful, please subscribe to my channel so that you will not miss any of my videos. In the next video I am going to cover chapter number 12, that is dictionary. Till then keep studying. See you in the next video.